Here we go. All right, so today we're going to be talking about the disease, right? What does that mean? Where did it come from? How do we know? So a lot of times when people come into treatment, they don't necessarily believe that it's a disease. They've participated in things that they're not proud of, so they think it's a badness instead of a sickness, or a badness instead of an illness. So I want to talk about where were we and how did we evolve to where we are now. So I talked a little bit yesterday about the barbaric things that they used to do with people with substance use disorder. Substance use disorder is a relatively new term. It used to be addict, alcoholic, but we find that there's a great amount of stigma attached to those labels, and it really speaks more to the badness than the illness, in my opinion and perspective. So we use now the term substance use disorder, which really goes along with the medical model, which I'm going to break down for you today. Okay? But before I do that, I want to take us back thousands of years. Okay? So I talked to you yesterday about some of the barbaric things that they used to do with people. So, what might they see, right? They might see that somebody is walking around intoxicated, impaired, there's something wrong. And believe it or not, way back thousands of years ago, they used to put leeches on our bodies to suck out the bad blood. They thought that people with substance use disorder, again, they didn't call it that then, they thought that there was something wrong. And so if they sucked out the bad blood, that would cure them. What do you think happened?
They got anemic?
Well, it didn't cure them for sure. They found that they would have a cyclical effect, and that the person would be shortly thereafter participating in the same types of behaviors and worse, right? So that didn't work. So fast forward, right? Thousands of years, evolution takes hold, and they come up with the drunk tank. Anybody familiar with the drunk tank? Right? So Uncle Charlie walks around the neighborhood and he's offending the neighbors, community, and the neighbors are like, hey, you better do something because Uncle Charlie's at it again. So the police would get involved, and they would go pick up Uncle Charlie, and they, Uncle Charlie can't be walking around the neighborhood like that. Let's put you in the jail cell. They took him to jail, and they would keep him overnight until he sobered up. Right? Well, if Uncle Charlie has enough episodes with experiencing the police, then maybe he'll stop. What do you think happens? Doesn't stop, right? And so neighbors are like, oh my goodness, families like, oh my goodness, there must be something really wrong with the Uncle Charlies of the world, because you would think that they would stop if the police kept having to be involved. But Uncle Charlie, having substance use disorder and not able to really manage without some sort of treatment, would continue down the path that he was going. So they had the bright idea, we'll put him in with insane people, right? So they put him into asylums. Now, people who were in asylums back then, usually they had severe persistent mental health disorders, meaning they were seeing things, hearing things, and maybe Uncle Charlie by this time was hearing things, seeing things, because his illness had progressed to the point where he's delusional, hallucinating. So it seemed appropriate. He must have some sort of insane problem, so let's put him where we put people who have psychiatric problems. So put him in with the people with psychiatric diagnosis, and what do you think happened?
He doesn't get better?
Actually, just the opposite. He gets better, he wakes up and he's like, oh my goodness, where am I? All of these people are hearing things, seeing things, and I'm feeling better. I need my family to get me out of here. I don't belong here. Right? So the substance use disordered individual from way back when didn't really have an appropriate place to go where things could effectively make the changes that were necessary, right? Are you with me? Can you see
Yes.
this happening, right? And of course the family was like, oh my goodness, I don't want to put them there. So a lot of times people wouldn't even send their people to psychiatric facilities. And if they did, and Uncle Charlie got on the phone and said, these people, have major problems, I'm not like them, then family would go pick them up, bring them home, and what do you think happens?
He's walking in here drunk.
He's walking the neighborhood drunk again, right? As an example. So lots of things could have happened, but we're just using that for this analogy, this story. Okay, so we know they don't belong in a psychiatric facility. This is a criminal problem. This is a criminal problem. It has to be a criminal problem because if we put them with people who have psychiatric diagnosis disorders, they don't really fit there. And if we just wait until they sober up, they just go and do it all over again. So they must be criminal. So they criminalized substance use disorder, right? And of course, something has to be done. So that's, the best that they had at the time. So we have DUIs and substance-related crimes all the time. So currently, I don't know the numbers specifically, but currently in our correctional facilities, anybody know what's the percentage of people who are in our correctional facilities today that are substance use disordered?
90%.
Probably or even higher.
Really?
Probably or even higher, right? So they, came up with alternative to prison sentencing, community mental health, allowing people to try to address their illness. And so that's where we are today. A lot of people who are substance use disordered individuals are sitting in prisons and jails as opposed to sitting in seats like this. It's sad. It's sad. So what I want you to know is that you're very privileged. It's a privilege to be in treatment. That treatment does work. And we don't have to put leeches on us. We don't have to be thrown in a drunk tank. And we don't have to be thrown in a state hospital somewhere. That with the right application, daily maintenance of our recovery plan, then we don't have to go to those places. And that recovery is possible. Okay? But we have to treat it like it's an illness, like it's a disease, so that way we don't convince ourselves that it's a badness and it is really a sickness. Okay? So in the 1950s, right? This is when the Alcoholics Anonymous was really pushing. Alcoholics Anonymous was established, I believe, in 1953. They went to the American Medical Association. They're not just making this up, okay? This isn't an Alcoholics Anonymous term. But Alcoholics Anonymous was very involved in getting the medical community to understand that this is an illness, not a badness. And even back then it was very difficult, but the American Medical Association did determine alcoholism as a disease. And what we know now is that individuals who are afflicted with substance use disorder, based on their chemical makeup, will use different substances based on what their chemical makeup prefers. So we take alcoholism as a disease and we extend that over to the rest of the substances. And recently, the term has been changed from alcoholism to substance use disorder to cover all of the substances that an individual is dependent upon. Okay? So what the American Medical Association was able to do is say, okay, we're going to look at this criteria for what it means to have a disease. So there are some things that are not diseases, and there are some things that are diseases, okay? And for the sake of time, I put the criteria up on the board. So for instance, the flu is not a disease, right? A cold is not a disease. However, cancer, diabetes, anything to be characterized a disease must have these 4 criteria. Chronic, progressive, incurable, and fatal. So the first thing we want to look at is, well, what does that mean, chronic? Anybody have an idea?
Happens frequently.
Happens frequently.
Yeah. It's almost like you can't help it.
It's severe, right? Happens frequently, and it's severe. Right? If it wasn't severe, then we wouldn't pay attention. It would come, it would go, we'd be on with our lives, right? But it's happening, the illness or the symptoms associated are severe enough that we're paying attention, right? And what does this mean, progressive?
It's worse.
Gets worse. It gets worse over time, right? And we saw that this morning, not on this video. Sorry, folks. Different video. That it gets worse over time, right? So we can talk about progressive as the use gets worse over time. We increase our use over time. We can talk about the consequences get use over time, right? Because what was happening when we were in our teens is very different than what's happening now. And the deterioration of the self progresses. You understand what I mean about that, right? When we talked about a different video, folks, well, I'll get to it. The physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, right? The progression of the illness deteriorates those aspects of the self as well, right? So we're talking about the substance use, we're talking about the consequences, and we're talking about the deterioration of the self over time, right? And this is part of the assignments that I give you so that you can see the progression of the illness in your lives, okay? That's why it's important that we're doing our assignments and really focused on that, because I only have you for a blink of an eye. Even 120 days is a blink of an eye, okay? So much to teach you in a little short period of time, okay? So we're going to get into our assignments, we're going to get into our work, we're going to have great awarenesses and insights, and you're going to be so filled up that hopefully on that day when the craving comes, you're going to say, oh, now I'm going to pull out my black notebook, and I have lots of reasons not to. And hopefully that will be powerful enough to just get you today. Tomorrow, we'll take care of tomorrow. But today, we don't have to use no matter what. And we're equipping ourselves with our ammunition. Your ammunition. I can load you with all kinds of reasons. But in those black notebooks, you've loaded yourself. Okay? With my guidance. Okay? Incurable. What does that mean?
Never go away.
It's not going away. I can't give you a pill to make it get better. Even 32 years, right? It's not going away. It's in remission, but it's not going away. So just because we have a period of abstinence for 30 days doesn't mean that we're cured. Just because we have a period of abstinence for a year, 2 years, 5 years does not mean that we're cured. So many times after a period of time, people stop, let up on their recovery plan, convince themselves that they can use one more time. Maybe I won't use that bad drug, whatever that means to them. And as soon as any substance is administered into the already predisposed chemical system, that trigger of, I want more happens. And so we know that substance use disorders are incurable. Now, incurable and untreatable are very different things, right? We have an illness that's very treatable, but it takes consistent, persistent vigilance on a daily basis, because after we start to let up, all of those characteristics, even before we pick up a substance, start to come back in.
Right.
Okay? And yeah, we don't like that last one. Last word is fatal, right? And oftentimes we think it can't happen to me. But it does happen. Our people, when I say our people, I'm saying substance use disordered individuals, people with mental health disorders. Substance use disorder is a mental health disorder. Are dying tens of thousands at a time when we don't need to be, as long as we daily treat our illness. Okay? So how does our illness show up? Right? And again, for the sake of time, I put it on here, up here for us, right? So there's the physical aspect, there's the psychological aspect, and there's the spiritual aspect. Okay? And we learned this morning that we get sick spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically. And then we get better opposite. Physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. Okay? So those are the aspects of the self that are affected by the disease of addiction, substance use disorder diagnosis. How does the physical show up? The utter compulsion to use despite our wanting to. Anybody have an example? I'll make it up. Okay? Can I make it up?
Yeah.
Right? I'm not going to do it today. Or I'm going to put it down in the basement. We don't have basements here in Florida. I don't know what has a basement. We're going to put it over in that other room, out of sight, out of mind. But as we're going through our day, we're compelled, right? Because the compulsion is driven from the obsession. I know it's over there. I know it's over there.
Right.
Right? And even though everything about us was trying not to move into that compulsion, we do it anyway. Now, here's where we take the substance out, and I remind you that the substance is a symptom of our illness. That it's really about the brain chemistry, and even without the substance, we still have compulsions, we still have obsessions, we're still self-obsessed and self-centered, unless treated. If we apply treatment to these areas of our lives, we can recover. So that's what we're treating. Not just keeping the substance down. We're treating the obsession, the compulsion, the self-obsession, and the self-centeredness. Everybody have that? Understand? Understand?
Yes.
Okay? When we treat those, then we can keep the substance down. okay? So we're compelled, we're driven, we have difficulty stopping that compulsion because we're obsessed, we get fixed on something, right? Oh, I saw that pretty red dress when I went by and I was, window shopping. Okay, and I'm thinking about it still 3 days later. And there's something about that I just keep wanting. I don't need it. You understand? I have dresses with tags on that I haven't, right? I don't need it. But there's this drive, this compulsion, right? That once I see something, if I could just be happy, I know that red dress would make me so happy. But Pamela, you have, 5 dresses with tags on. Yeah, but this one, right? So as an example, right, you have examples of your own, okay? I just want you to think about what those things are, right? If I then I would be happy. Now we're starting to walk into the self-obsession, the self-centeredness of the illness, of the substance use disorder, of the mental health disordered individual, right? We sing the me song. Me, 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 me. Right? Like, I don't care how my drinking is affecting you. I don't care how my behaviors are affecting you. As a matter of fact, I will step right over you to get to whatever it is. And folks, we think that we just do that with our drugs. Alcohol is a drug. Marijuana is a drug. Okay. Just to remind you. Okay? We think we just do that with our drugs. No. It takes a long time for us to really grasp this concept, but introducing it to you so that you know that it's there and you know that that's really what you're treating. Okay? Because when we don't get our way, how do we feel? What do we do?
We get mad.
Drink at it. Use at it. Right? So that's what I mean when I'm talking about the self-centered and the self-obsession, right? Me, 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 me. The world revolving around making Pamela happy. If Pamela's happy, then everybody's happy. And if Pamela's not happy,
Nobody's.
Look out.
nobody's going to be happy, right? And that's the complete and utter self-centeredness that this disease presents us with, right? And in order for us to heal, in order for us to get along with everybody else in the world, right? Like, everybody's not going to move out of the way of traffic because Pamela's coming, even though I think, don't you know who I think I am? And don't you know how important what my job and what my needs are, right? Anybody with me? I'm not alone in this world, right? Right? Like, get out of the way, I'm here.
Yeah.
Right? I have arrived, right? So we have to treat that part of ourselves. And sometimes it's hard early on for us to recognize that. So today, there's more to this, but we're going to end, okay? But I wanted to introduce you to the criteria that must exist for a disease, for an illness to be labeled a disease. I wanted you to understand what that criteria is. Sounds like you have a good concept, but I want you to read your notes over tonight and really, because we didn't get a chance, because I would have been extracting more information out of you, because I really want you to have your own experience with chronic, your own experience with progressive, your own experience with incurable, your own experience with fatal. Okay? And then I want you to think about the compulsion that you have or had over your substance use, drug of destruction, introducing that to the people on the video. Drug of destruction, okay? Think about the compulsion, some examples. You might even use them in your 5 negative consequences, okay? The obsession about the drug of destruction so that it really sinks in, okay? Because I can put this stuff on the board and I can use all kinds of pretty colors, but if you don't internalize it, understand it, have your own examples of it, then it doesn't really get into you. Understand? And then self-obsessed and self-centered around the drug of destruction, okay? So that's one. Two is, how do these show up without your drug? Because really, this second part is the disease that we're treating. It's easier at this stage of your development for you to recognize the compulsion, the obsession, the self-centeredness, and self-obsession around the drug of destruction. So I want you to start there. This is your homework, okay? But this is really the disease. When we take the drug out, we still have these components of our illness active, and this is what we start to, after we get this stabilized, drug of destruction, this is what we're treating for the rest of our lives with our recovery plan. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yes. You want to elaborate a little bit, Ken, or no?
Well, as you said, it doesn't go away. It just goes into remission. So it is a lifelong battle or maintenance. Basically, you have to work on it daily going forward.
Right. Beautiful. And to just extend on that, this is the disease. We used this to help us with these aspects of our disease, right? A lot of times when we come to treatment, we think this is our disease. When I'm pointing at the DOD, drug of destruction, we think that the drug is the disease. It's not. The disease is made up of the obsession, compulsion, self-centeredness, self-obsession. And those are the things that are chronic, progressive, incurable, and fatal. Are you with me on that? No. Yes.
I just want clarification on the homework.
So you're going to take your drug of destruction, because that's easier to recognize, and how the compulsion showed up around that.
The obsessive
How
thoughts.
the obsession around that. How the self-obsession, self-centeredness around that.
Right.
Right?
Number two.
Number two is we're going to take away the drug, and we're just going to look at our behaviors, our attitudes. The obsession. We get fixed on something. We're compelled to go after it, even though our better judgment says, yeah, probably not a good idea. We say, oh, be quiet, because this is what's going to make me happy. We sing the me song. Right? And it's all about me. Doesn't matter how it affects this person or that person or this situation. I'm going to make me feel better by doing whatever that obsessive compulsive thing is.
Okay.
Okay? Help?
Yes.
Okay? Everybody good?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. So, for those of you watching today, I hope that you benefited from understanding some of the aspects of where we were, where we are now, and where we were in between, and that we have an illness that's treatable. And my hope is that by following these informational videos, you'll be also able to understand the criteria for disease as well.